Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Esoteric and our continuing series on the MiSter FPGA DE10 Nano project. And you know what happens when you get a brand new MiSter Core update for the Sega Saturn? We do a new video with all new tests, both viewer requests and things I want to check out. Because the Sega Saturn Core was updated last week, so we're going to take a look at what is running, and things that have improved, and things that maybe have regressed as well. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But kicking it right off, Panzer Dragoon 2, a lot of people have been asking to see this revisited, and I will say that it is performing much better than it used to. Everything looks exactly like it should for this game, all the controls are responsive. This is just Panzer Dragoon 2 on Sega Saturn except via FPGA. Now I will say that the audio is quite scratchy and does have some clicks here and there, and it will clip the audio channel a few times. So this is gameplay and control wise feeling exactly like you would expect Panzer Dragoon to play. But on the audio front, it is not something that you probably really want to listen to too closely, and I would recommend you turn your volume down as you play the game. Because some games have no audio, some games have very quiet audio, but some games like to boost the volume up on certain sound effects to the point where it's going to clip that channel, and if you're wearing headphones, you're going to have a bad time. But this is an absolutely spectacular Sega Saturn game, and it looks amazing here on MiSter. Leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think about the overall look. But this is one that everyone kept asking me to come back to, and I figured why not. And this is another video Andy D from the MiSter Discords helped out with some captures on. So if you don't like the gameplay of Panzer Dragoon 2 here, you think you could do better, lodge that complaint directly with Andy and I will forward it to him. All jokes aside, it's just amazing to see this running on an FPGA chip, especially because for the longest time people thought Sega Saturn would not be possible, but Srg320 has done an amazing job of updating this, and I do hope to play it in the future with some better sound because the soundtrack to this game is absolutely spectacular. But this is one of those Sega Saturn games that's absolutely iconic. When people think of the platform, they think of stuff like Panzer Dragoon, Nights into Dreams, games like that. So this is one of those games that I feel like is going to be one of the first tests anyone that installs the Saturn beta core on their MiSter is going to choose, or when it does go public, one of the first games everyone is going to play. But tell me down below, once the core is public, what's the first Sega Saturn game you're going to play? Because I can tell you unequivocally, for me, it's going to be one more run through of the Saturn version of Symphony of the Night. But if you want to play Panzer Dragoon 2 here on the current MiSter Core build, it seems to be working perfectly fine outside of those audio issues. That's not to say that 45-50 minutes in you're not going to experience a random freeze, so don't get too far in if you want to actually save your progress, because you just can't do that right now. Now moving on to another game that didn't used to work and currently does is Vadalva. At least I believe I am pronouncing it correctly. This is basically like a 2D fighting game with RC cars on a 3D battlefield. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It is a very strange game, but it also has a great art style and it is a ton of fun. And this is one of those that when the previous core just refused to load for me, you could get into the character selection screen and then it would freeze. But you can see here now everything is working exactly as you would expect. If you ever remember that TV show where they had different engineers battle robots against one another in an arena, can't remember the name, this is basically the video game version of that long before the TV show existed. You run around the arena, you try to attack your opponent. It's got some Power Stone vibes, except you're not playing as characters, you are just people inside of these cars. It takes a minute to get used to this game spatially because it does have an interesting control scheme with the camera always moving around, but once you get the hang of it, it actually is a really intriguing game, and it is a good instance of using 3D on MiSter with the Saturn core. This game is running fluidly, it's running exactly as you would expect, the control is there, and this is probably like 90% of the way to perfect audio as well. So after this match, I'll let you listen to it for just a bit. There's a little bit of scratches here and there, but that could just be part of the soundtrack because trust me, some games back in the day didn't have perfect audio on the disc either. And if you've never played Vadalva, definitely check it out. It is a niche game, but it is a ton of fun. And like I said, the soundtrack on this one, 90-95% to perfect. So go ahead and listen for 45 seconds and I'll be right back. It also has a great soundtrack, and it's hard to say if some of those sound effects are scratchy because of the current core, or maybe that is just the bit and sample rate of those sound effects, because that does happen back in the day. Sometimes audio just doesn't sound great coming out of a Saturn or a PlayStation 1 or any other piece of hardware. Now moving on to another game that people wanted me to revisit, and the good thing is there's a lot of improvements on the May core, is Sonic Jam, more importantly the 3D area, Sonic World right here, because last time we looked at this, there was no grass texture on the ground whatsoever, it was just blank. And Srg320 has made improvements to VDP1 and VDP2, and that is what is allowing us to see this running exactly as you would expect on a real Sega Saturn. If there is any difference in the visuals here, I cannot be able to tell whatsoever. Now I will say, at least here, the sound is definitely very, very quiet, and that's something that's happening with the core. Sometimes you get perfect sound, sometimes you get quiet sound, and sometimes you get no sound whatsoever. But running around as Sonic in this little 3D world gives us a glimpse into what could have been done on the Saturn, and I will say that the 2D games are working as well, although there is still some slowdown here and there that seems like it is in the core, because I never remember Sonic and Knuckles slowing down on my Sega Saturn, but it has been years since I played it. So take a look at this area right here and you tell me, did it used to slow down there, or is that a core issue? Because I cannot tell, and I could take my copy out, but I'll do that in a couple weeks. But if you want to check this out, it's working so much better on the current core, and that's absolutely what we love to see. It's so much fun coming back and testing these, and a few viewers did request a Sonic Jam test, so this one's for you. But if you run around in 3D on the Sega Saturn in Sonic, you can 100% do so today. But moving on to a game that just 100% works and I cannot find anything wrong with it whatsoever is Herc's Adventure. Now I am going to be taking my capture of this game, and Andy D captured one for me as well, so I can compare two different instances of two different MiSter setups, one off SD card and one off a hard drive running. Because you'll see there on my capture, this FMV intro did freeze, but if we go over to Andy D's capture, it continues to play. So it seems like maybe some of the FMV freezing has to do with access speeds and transfer data rates across different storage mediums. This is an unscientific test. You will see here as we go into the game, the female character are all my captures. When you go over to Herc proper, that's going to be Andy D. But I did want to put two captures of the same game side by side to see if we could see any differences outside of that FMV cutscene freezing on my end. And what I can say, comparing the two captures side by side, showing you them here, I cannot find any functional difference between these two instances outside of that FMV working better on Andy D's setup. So if you do want to try running these via hard drive and not micro SD card, that might get you some more compatibility, and I think in future tests I may actually switch over to his methodology just to see what else I can get going. And that's not to say that when the core is finalized you'll have to do anything like that. I'm sure this is just down to the fact that it is still work in progress, and different people are going to get different experiences depending on how much RAM you're using, what variant of the RAM module you have, and even how you're loading the data in the game. But Herc's Adventure is a ton of fun, and here on MiSter, the sound is perfect, the controls are perfect, and I saw absolutely zero graphical glitches the entire time I played this game for about 15 minutes or so. Even these kind of cutscenes that aren't cutscenes load in perfectly and have great dialogue. But speaking of the soundtrack, it's awesome, and it sounds awesome here on MiSter. Listen for 30 seconds, and I'll come back and show you some more games. This sounds really good to me, but leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think. But if you've never played Herc's Adventure, definitely check it out. This is an awesome 2D side-scrolling kind of beat-em-up hack-and-slash game that has so many different worlds and some absolutely amazing artwork as well. If you've never played it before, I can't recommend it enough. Now everyone, and I mean everyone, asked me to test Grandia, and thanks to Andy D because he sent this capture over, because I have had a very busy last 2 weeks, so he's been a huge help in getting some of these videos made. Thanks Andy D. I don't care what people say about you, I think you are alright. And as we move into this sweeping intro to Grandia, it looks absolutely stunning from an art perspective. You might see every once in a while that there are some sprites that break up, But I will say the intro to this game on the Sega Saturn looks spectacular. All of the colors, all of the 3D models, this is what I remember 3D looking like back in the day, and that is why I'm so nostalgic for it. And obviously a lot of you are nostalgic for Grandia too, because this is the #1 most requested test that I keep getting in comments, and it is here today. And I will say that it's 100% playable. I checked it out after Andy D sent these captures over, and I was able to get pretty far into the game, although I wouldn't recommend checking it out because obviously there's definitely some issues and you can't save. You'll see here on the character portraits they are a little bit mangled. It looks like there's some sort of interlacing problem or other sort of video layering where it is basically alternating those frames or something like that. Leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think it is. But when you're just walking around in-game, in-world, things do seem to work perfectly fine. Everything is drawing exactly as you would expect. But I will say, if you take a look at the intro, there's definitely some interlacing or field issues here, because as opposed to combining these fields together, it's showing them side by side. So this seems like the frames should be interleaving, but as they currently sit on the current core, they are not doing that. But if you want to check Grandia out today, you can 100% do it. Just get used to some graphical glitches. Now moving on to a game absolutely nobody requested whatsoever, but I wanted to check out is Highway 2000. I am not saying this is a good game, but it is a game that renders in full 3D. The car, all of the buildings, everything in this is using polygons outside of some of the billboards, and I love to see how the 3D rendering is going on the current build. Now this game isn't a bad game whatsoever, it just takes a lot of practice to understand how to control it. But my entire time with the game, everything worked exactly as I would expect. It is running at full speed, which isn't to say 60 frames a second, but native Saturn frame rate when this game came out new, and I do have this on my shelf. It's just a really good example of how the 3D is rendering on the current core, and I have absolutely no complaints about it whatsoever. It just takes a long time to get used to the drifting mechanic, but when you do, there is a ton of fun to be had in this game. It's never going to live up to the levels of something like Daytona USA or Sega Rally, but it is a good B- tier racing game that you can 100% check out today and see how things are going on the core, because I like mixing up the 2D and the 3D elements all the time to see how they are working. Now moving on to a game that everyone wanted me to revisit, it's Shining Force 3, and I am not at all surprised that you wanted me to revisit it, because it is one of the Saturn's most popular RPGs, and the last time I showed it on this channel, it had a lot of graphical corruption in both the overworld screen, as well as more of the town area as well. But this FMV intro works perfectly fine. It looks and sounds great. I can't see anything here that doesn't work outside of the macro blocking, but that's just because of the compression for game discs. So if you see any artifacting, it's that plus YouTube compression, and has nothing to do with the core whatsoever, because some people do ask me that question on the FMVs. And the good news is Shining Force 3 has definitely improved since the last time I showcased it on the channel. That is not to say it is perfect though. You will see some graphical corruption in the overworld on those trees, but it is much reduced from the last time, where basically half of the polygons are completely missing from the screen. And as we get into the overworld area here in town, at least on this screen whatsoever, there's only a little bit of flickering and missing sprites on the character in the bottom right hand corner, and I will point out a better example of that in just a moment. But when we get inside and take a look at what's going on, outside of some lines missing in sprites, this looks fundamentally much better than the last time I tested it. And it's probably just a code or call to VDP1 or VDP2 that's not completely strung together yet in the core. But as we move outside, when you just pause and take a look, it looks basically perfect. It's only in movement when you get too many sprites on screen at once do you start seeing some of those graphical glitches. But this, again, another absolutely spectacular JRPG for the Sega Saturn. And if you've never played it before, don't start it now on Saturn because you can't save and it might freeze, but definitely check it out once the core is done. And outside of that sprite kind of missing right there, I will say the sound is like 95% good as well. Go ahead and listen, and I still got more games for you. Sounds pretty good, but leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think. Maybe it's a little bit hollow, but it's been a long time since I played this game on original Saturn hardware, so it might just sound like that. And everything works perfectly fine. You'll see here in the battle mode until we actually go over to the 3D render. It does have some issues with the sprite on that tree there, but when we come back out, the game stops executing code. Definitely not playable yet, but you can get into it and it does have some improvements. Now, one that a few different people asked me to test is going to be the following game right here, and that is Sky Target. I cannot get this to boot on my system whatsoever. I get it to the now loading screen, and that is as far as it gets. So the people that requested to know whether or not Sky Target was working on the current core, at least for me, that's an unequivocal no. Now, a bunch of you requested Karaoke Collection Volume 2, and I think you're just joking around, but hey, you asked for something, why not show it to you here? Now, granted, there's only certain parts I can show you. It's definitely cut up a lot, and I'm not sure why anyone's interested in this game, because if this is the type of content you want to watch, the internet has it for free in spades, and it's a lot better here. And I always think to myself, at this point in time, a lot of the people featured in this game are probably grandmothers, so take that thought away from this video. It's weird that this even existed on the Sega Saturn in the first place, and while I can't show you much of it whatsoever, I'll tell you Playboy Karaoke Collection Volume 1 and 2 work on the current core. And that is our new batch of tests. As always, if you want to see something that I haven't covered yet, leave me a comment down below and I'm happy to check it out. But I'm happy to say that more and more games that I test just work on MiSter, and big thanks to Andy D for getting me some captures as well for the video, especially for the one on Herc's Adventure so I could compare results across 2 different boards. Short of that, I'll have another video on MiSter next week, and I'll have videos throughout the week as well on different topics, but hopefully we see a core update soon. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Bye bye.